My guest tonight inherited a political mantle, but evolved and grew into a statesman and a philosopher. Today, after a gap of 12 years, he's back in the Indian Parliament. I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Karan Singh. Dr. Karan Singh, you're back in Parliament after 12 years.
Yes.
You have been extremely active in non-political areas, but perhaps somewhat less in the limelight. What have you been doing these 12 years?
I've been doing a variety of things which really interest me, Rajiv. 3 or 4 areas. One is education. I've been involved in education. I was on this UNESCO International Commission for Education in the 21st Century. That took us 3 years going around the world, and we come up with a report which was released a few months ago. Then I'm heading an environmental NGO called the People's Commission on Environment and Development, India, which holds a series of public hearings throughout the country. We go to a place, we collaborate with a local NGO, and we have a whole day's public hearing, and we publish the results. Then I was chairman of the Oroville Foundation for 6 years. That's a very interesting experiment in interracial, interreligious, interethnic, international living. And then also, of course, my first love, which is religion, the Interfaith movement. I'm chairman of the Temple of Understanding, and Vedanta, which is my own personal interest.
What has it been like being back in Parliament? How much has it changed since you left it?
Well, I was in Parliament for 18 years, but that was in the Lok Sabha from 1967 to 1984. This time I've come back to the Raj Sabha. Now, it's a very different ambience. For one thing, when I came into the Lok Sabha, I was a minister, so I was on the receiving end, as it were, of questions, and it was a different, entirely different situation. This time I'm much more relaxed because I can ask the questions now. The Raj Sabha is a different kind of house to the Lok Sabha. It's more compact. And it has, I think, a different sort of atmosphere.
You've mentioned that you were in the Lok Sabha for 18 years, and somewhere in your biography you talk about how your life moves in 18-year cycles.
So it appears. So it appears. I became head of state at the age of 18, which looking back is really quite incredible. I'm myself astonished. And remained that for 18 years as regent and Sadr-i-Riyasat and governor. Then I came into Parliament and was in Parliament for 18 years. And then after that, I was doing, as I said, these other areas of activity which are not overtly political, but which are important, I think, significant, and much more satisfying. Now, somehow this has been interrupted. Now, after a 12-year period, I've come back to Parliament. Now, let's see what lies ahead.
You had a long and intimate association with Kashmir, and as you mentioned that for 18 years you were in a sense sort of titular head at least of the state, and you're now involved with the committee on the autonomy of Kashmir. During this long period of association, have you felt times of sort of despair?
Well. First of all, just a minor correction. The state is Jammu and Kashmir, not Kashmir. A common mistake, Rajiv, but one which reflects, to some extent, the lack of a general awareness of how complex that state is. If it had only been Kashmir, perhaps the problems would have been easier to solve, if you see what I mean. But to answer your question, yes, the state has been through a terrible period in the last 7 years. It's been horrible. Everything has collapsed. Thousands of people have been killed, including security forces. Lakhs of people have been uprooted. Crores worth of property destroyed. Hundreds of crores worth of trade and tourism lost. And it has been a major disaster. I'm not sure whether people in the rest of the country realize the extent of the damage that has been done to the social fabric in that state, to the economic structure, to the administration, to the political background. We've now, therefore, one didn't despair, but one was very unhappy and very sad at what was happening.
Why didn't you despair? It seemed at one time
yes, well, I suppose
case.
I'm not a despairing type. I have a basic substratum of faith. there were 2 or 3 occasions which were particularly difficult. You may remember the Hazrat Bal problem. When my wife and I went up there at the height of the crisis, and we went to Hazrat Bal. The same thing happened after Charar-e-Sharif burnt down. Both of us went there and we offered a chadar, because we have a very deep psychic bond, as it were, with the valley. Although we are Dogras ourselves from Jammu, but for the last 150 years the state has been a combined state. And so even at the very darkest hour, I did feel that there was something that was going to prevent the whole situation from totally collapsing.
But might there have been things that the Indian nation as such might have done differently immediately after independence, at the time when you were sort of more intimately involved with Kashmir?
Yes, of course, that's a very long story. There have been a number of unfortunate developments on both sides. I don't think it has been handled with the sort of finesse and understanding and compassion that was necessary. For one thing, there was a time when there were people in the union government who were closely associated with Jammu and Kashmir.
Who were these people?
For example, I was in the cabinet. Sayyid Mir Qasim was in the cabinet. D.P. Dhar was in the cabinet. Om Mehta was in the Council of Ministers. Shafiq Qureshi was, to just mention 5 people. We were all there in the decision-making processes. So we were able to try and influence people in a certain direction. After that, after we all left, there was really nobody who knew anything about the state. I'm sorry to say that the people who were handling the state, they may have had the best intentions, but I do not think they had really an understanding.
What might this understanding have been that you feel, or an insight that would have made a decisive difference?
First of all, the sheer complexity of the state, the fact that it is not a unilateral state. There are at least 3 clear-cut regions. There's Kashmir Valley, there's Jammu, there's Ladakh, with differing perceptions, with differing economic and political and psychological profiles. Therefore, that is the first step towards understanding what would have happened. Secondly, how to balance the demands for autonomy or for some kind of a special status with the implacable centralization that has taken place all over India with all the other states. The federal structure has really been virtually distorted in the last 50 years, and more power has accrued to the center. So if there'd been more understanding on that, and also then if there'd been a capacity to allow the political processes to take their course instead of intervening. For example, you remember in, when was it, 1983, Farooq was thrown out and Mr. G.M. Shah was put in. Now that was the beginning of the disaster this time round. So there were many things. It's not really possible to go into it in any detail, but there was a lack of proper handling, I feel.
Do you think there is the risk now that we have another sort of window of opportunity, as frequently happens, that this might be frittered away in some ways? Or is being frittered away already?
No, I don't think, well, it could be frittered away, yes, because, you know, if I may say so, there are some expert fritterers in Delhi. But one hopes that it won't. For one thing, it's too soon really to be able to judge. Farooq has just been in power now for hardly 3 months, and he's just still finding his feet. And the government of India also is involved with 101 other problems, and I'm not sure whether they've had time to concentrate too much on Jammu and Kashmir. I think we must give it a little more time. But we must also have a sense, I agree with you, a sense of some urgency.
How much time do you think, I mean, this is sort of obviously a difficult question, but how much time do you think we have? 6 months, a year, 2 years?
Well, let me tell you, the committees, there are 2 committees set up now. One is my committee, which is looking into the relationship between the state and the center. And the other is a committee headed by the Chief Minister, with Balraj Puri as working president, which is looking into the question of regional autonomy. Now, both these committees should report by the end of May. Now, once the reports are in, then the ball will be back in the court of the state government and the government of India. I would say that by the end of this year, we should be able to have either got the situation together and be moving towards some kind of stable solution, or, God forbid, would have gone in the other direction and again be bogged down in chaos and disaster.
Dr. Karan Singh, you've had such a diverse range of interests, and I think that your early interest in the spiritual perhaps was your academic work with Aurobindo, and you hold the record for the highest marks in the political science examination of the master's degree, and then went on to do a PhD on Aurobindo. And since that time, you've described in your autobiography how you've had at least 3 different formal initiations. What sort of role does spirituality play in your life? To what degree does it guide you and lead you in the rumble-tumble world of politics, shall I say?
Well, what I try to do is not to differentiate between my life and my spiritual quest. In fact, I think that the process of living itself is the spiritual quest. And if one can meld the two, you can't compartmentalize. Some people can do it. They say, all right, the sort of Sunday church syndrome, that you go to church on Sundays and the rest of the day. I don't think that's the way it works, because spirituality is nothing if it is not permeating your life, your relationships, your actions and your activities, and the way you speak and the way you listen. So I want to look upon them as a whole, and therefore I would say that I do try to bring my philosophy into my life. How far I succeed, I cannot say, but I do try and bring it in. I do try and develop some of the values about which I lecture to the best of my ability. But more important than that, I try to keep an inner contact. In other words, for example, I'm now talking with you, but I'm also aware of the fact that I'm talking with you. Now that itself is a spiritual discipline, to be able to stand back and to watch yourself, as it were, from another standpoint, so that you don't simply go with the flow of the moment. You're able to stand back and get a different dimension of consciousness. That's what I try and do from time to time. As I said, it's impossible for me to judge how far I've been successful in that.
Do you frequently find that this sort of spiritual aspiration or sort of consciousness which pervades your sort of everyday life is seemingly and frequently in conflict, particularly when you're sort of interacting with the political world, which seems to have a dirty sort of reputation this time?
There's a general impression. No, I don't think so. I think that it really doesn't matter who you are interacting with or what it is that you are doing. You have to be able to keep that inner contact. I agree sometimes when there's a lot of noise and when there's a lot of tumult, one can lose the thread. But one has got to teach oneself to hold on to that. The myth of the Ariadne's thread, which leads you out of the labyrinth. So if you hold on to that, then howsoever convoluted the labyrinth may be, you have a good chance of getting out. But once you lose it, then you are lost. So it's just that gentle pressure, that holding on to the thread.
You have been also active, and you'd mentioned the Temple of Understanding and many sort of interfaith groups. What do you think forms the basis, or can form a constructive basis for interfaith dialogue? There has been sort of fairly a widespread assumption which says, well, God is one and there are different parts to that, and it seems somewhat simplistic.
It is somewhat. I think that the golden thread that binds all the religions of the world together lies in the spiritual awareness, in that mystical awareness of an entity that is greater than our individual selves. And if you look at the theology of religions, they are extremely different, and there doesn't seem to be much of a meeting point. But if you look at the mystics, for example, if you read the seers of the Upanishads, or you read Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi, or you read St. John on the Cross, or Meister Eckhart, or Ruysbroek, or the great Christian mystics, you will find that all of them seem to be speaking about the same sort of awareness. There's love, there's compassion, there's a transcendence along with an immanence. All of these things are there. So if we could move really towards a more experiential dialogue rather than an intellectual dialogue, I think that would bring us together. And one of the things that we do a lot in this interfaith movement is prayer, interfaith prayers. Because when people are praying, it becomes very clear that in fact they are praying to the same spirit, or whatever you want to call it. You know, it is absurd that if there are 10 different religions praying, there are not going to be 10 different gods ultimately to whom they pray. If there is a higher spirit, it has to be one. So those sorts of interactive activities, I think, are useful in the interfaith movement.
But yet, sort of religion as source of conflict seems to happen at a level where people are perhaps incapable, disinterested, or not inclined into this higher aspiration that you talk about, and where perhaps the interfaith dialogue or meeting ground is most needed.
Yes, I agree with you. Religion has been one of the great civilizing forces in human history. Art, literature, architecture, music, everything that is noble can be traced back perhaps to religion, and also one of the most divisive forces in human history. More people have been massacred and burnt and killed and tortured in the name of God than in any other name. This is the paradox of human history. And I think now, Rajiv, we've got to move, not slide back to the age of the jihads and the dharam yuddhs and the crusades, but move onwards to a new era of interfaith understanding. Because if we don't do that, then the global society that is emerging is doomed. Because we can no longer afford the luxury of conflicts in the name of religion.
How do we then begin to sort of address and convert those that we consider, well, shall I describe them for conversational purposes as fundamentalists, where sort of conflict really begins at, the temple of understanding, you're already the converted.
That is true, that is true. That is true. We have to take our movement to the grassroots. For example, environment. We had an interfaith meeting on the world religions and environment. And we found that despite differing theology, when it actually came to grassroots work, there was no religion which says that you should cut down trees or pollute waters or do anything. On the contrary, every religion had positive elements. Then poverty, you see, or for example, women. Or, there are many areas where we can get together some kind of a common platform. But basically, your question is a very, very important one. We've got to get our message across through people like you, through the media. That is the only way we can get into the rooms, the hearts and the minds of millions and millions of people on this planet, through television. I am a great believer in the power of the media. And I feel that if the media is used for these purposes, this is the only way in which you can spread environmental values, socially desirable values, and moral and spiritual values.
You mentioned the power of the media. Do you watch much television?
Yes, I do.
What kind of programs do you watch?
Well, I watch the news a lot. I also watch some of the old films when I get the time to do so. And I love the Discovery Channel. I love to watch these films that are mind-stretching, that give you new ideas. And I watch things like Inspector Morse and the X-Files and things like that. A wide variety. I love, my real favorite is MTV, but I don't seem to be able to get it. I'm a rock fan, as you know. I don't seem to be able to get MTV nowadays.
When did this sort of interest in, unlikely interest, shall I say, that we wouldn't normally associate that with you?
Yes, from Bill music. Haley and the Comets, from the real beginning, long before Elvis Presley. From Bill Haley and the Comets, right up to the present day, I've been following all the rock music. All the latest U2 and Dire Straits and Fine Young Cannibals and New Kids on the Block and the whole lot of them, Boys to Men. I love rock music. It is something which people are surprised, because they feel that if you are a Sanskritist, you've got to be square and boring and It's not true. It's not true, because the vibrancy, the music, the beat is all there in the vibrations, whether it is the Vedic chants or whether it is a beat.
You know, it's been sort of held out that the Indian culture and heritage and civilization has the vitality to absorb the best that comes in from different cultures. Do you feel in some ways that we're more threatened at this time than ever before?
I personally don't feel we are threatened. For example, our Indian rock groups and pop groups are becoming very well known abroad now. I think we are going to be able to ultimately Indianize a lot of the music. But the films, again, there we are threatened. I think that some of the recent Indian films also have got a great deal, an unacceptable level of violence. And that is something to which I think we should take firm objection. Because it is not fair for young children to be plonked down in front of television sets and to absorb all this negativity. It doesn't come with the music so much. I mean, the music, the rock music, very seldom has overt violence in it. But it comes with these movies, with the violent movies, with the killing, with the bursting of shells, and with the fires, and with the horrible things that happen.
You know, you've also written that you've sometimes been despairing that India has not lived up to its global potential in the manner that Vivekananda or Aurobindo had visualized the resurgence of India.
That it hasn't. So far.
What do you think might be the elements that could catalyze this, and what might this great grand role be? Or is that just empty chauvinism?
Well, in one word, I would say leadership. I would say that we have not now for many years been able to produce the sort of leadership that would combine a creative charisma with an acute awareness of the transition to a global society. The result is that the whole society has begun to fragment, and all sorts of new elements are coming in, which are new elements of conflict. Religion was there, now caste is there, and subcaste is there, and so on. And we are frittering away a lot of our energies, Rajiv, in this internecine strife, which, if put into some massive attempt to break the poverty barrier, could perhaps lead us to that position that we've envisaged. Because an economic breakthrough is an essential prerequisite for any kind of leadership role. You cannot have a leadership role when you have millions of people who don't get 1 square meal a day. So we've got to solve that at the same time with our rich cultural heritage, with our philosophical traditions, with our tremendously diverse and pluralistic cultural heritage. We should be able to make a major impact in the emerging global society.
Dr. Karan Singh, thank you very much indeed. It's been a great privilege. Thank you.
This program